We have three candidates, Ryan Ratledge, Dan LaPointe, and Lori Osher. So we're here to ask them questions this evening about issues that are of concern to you and members of the community. We're live streaming this on video tonight. And we'll also be taking questions through email and over the telephone as well as from the floor. So the format for tonight is there'll be a 2-minute opening statement from each of the candidates. They'll tell us a little bit about themselves and what they think is important about what the issues in town. And then we'll go into a question and answer period. We'll take questions from the floor and or over the telephone or by email. To ask a question of the candidates, we're going to ask you that you come to the podium and speak close to the microphone. If you're more than 6 inches from the microphone, it's not going to pick you up, and we're not going to hear you very well on the live streaming and on the video. So it's very important that you get real cozy with the microphone. The same thing for the candidates. Try to stay within about 6 inches from the microphone. I'll remind you if we're starting to have a problem with that. So with that, we'll start with the opening statements from Lori Osher. We drew numbers, and Lori will go first, followed by Dan, and then Ryan, and then we'll open it to the floor with questions. So, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Osher. I'm a small business owner. I live here in Orono. My business is making buildings more energy efficient. Prior to having my business, I was a faculty member at the University of Maine from 1999 to 2008. And I was a professor of environmental science. I also did research on ecosystems. Before that, I was a soil scientist and a land manager, so I worked with the U.S. Forest Service managing landscape scale land use change. And then I was an environmental consultant where I worked with businesses that were developing pieces of land in places like Orono. I'm running for Orono Town Council because I want to be part of smart, effective, green community development. My experience as a scientist, as someone who manages land, as someone who works with making buildings more energy efficient, are all the kind of things that I think could be helpful to our town. And I particularly am interested in developing housing for young families. We have wonderful community here, and it's a little bit hard for new families to buy into Orono. The only houses really available at low cost are kind of run down. So I'd be wanting to encourage development specifically for young families. I want Orono to be a green business hub. I want to promote the use of clean, renewable energy in Orono and start with Orono's buildings. And the other thing you need to know about me is that I was the treasurer for Orono Schools Coalition for the Arts. That's a parents booster organization. That's because I have children in high school that are very involved in the arts, and I understand how important it is to have funding for students who do not have the ability to participate because they don't have any extra cash in the family. So we do fundraising as part of OSCAR to make scholarships available so all kids can participate.
Good.
Okay, I did forget to mention that we are using a timer, and the candidates can see the timer as well as people in the audience. So try and keep on track with that. So, Dan.
Thank you. I'm Dan LaPointe. I'm very much a product of this community. My family's been here for many, many generations. I'm of early Acadian, and I have Maliseet, Micmac, and perhaps some Passamaquoddy. In what amounts? I don't know, because it's English, French, everything else. Now, I don't represent, but I'm saying that I am a member of the local Mechanics Lodge. I'm also a Knight of Columbus. These are great organizations that help our community. We have a recency. I run a junkyard on the end of the Kelly Road for my family. And we have a hallmark, landmark case, if you will, where the word grandfathering was defined with the town of Orono. Now, there's been several events of late where I think our police and fire department should be patted on the back. They should be supported on all levels. They have done a wonderful job, and they continue to do so. I'm a little bit concerned that political correctness has gotten out of control. Anything taken to this extreme is wrong. We have a problem with our history. History is one of the most fantastic things that we as Americans have, and we should treasure this along with our constitutional rights. I'm also a member of the Tea Party, taxed enough already. Do you like taxes? I don't. I think that this community, this city governance needs to be managed better so that we don't have problems with taxation. And that's what attracts the elderly.
Okay,
Is that it?
that's it, Dan.
Oh, darn. Okay. Well, I was having fun.
Okay, Ryan.
Hello, my name is Ryan Ratledge. My wife, Trey, and I moved our family to Orono a little more than 3 years ago. We have 4 kids. The eldest is at UMaine. Our middle 2 kids are at Orono High, and our youngest is at ASA. We absolutely love this town. I've worked in the rail industry for more than 23 years, and we're very thankful to have lived in some amazing places across this country. I grew up in New Mexico. We've lived in Washington State twice, Mississippi, Southern California, the Cincinnati area, and now Orono. We absolutely love this town. I've been asked why exactly I would like to serve on our town council, and it's a great question. I mean, the councilors that have served Orono over the course of its history have clearly been doing things right, so what can I add? What I'm not doing, I'm not practicing for a run for higher office, and I'm certainly not just looking for something else to fill my schedule. That's certainly not it. Things are going very well with our railroad, and Trey has recently obtained her main realtor's license. We've grown roots here, we'll finish raising our kids here, and I'm sorry, Dad, but we have no intentions of ever leaving here. We have a vested interest in the continued prosperity of Orono, so my motivation to serve simply stems from desire to work alongside the current cadre of civic leaders to keep Orono on track as a great community to live, study, or do business in. If the role of our council is to provide policy direction to our town manager, then I know that my unique professional background, coupled with the perspective that I've gained from living in many diverse communities, will allow me to add value to this council. I'd like to thank the many people that have already pledged their support, and I'd ask for your vote on November 7th. Thank you.
Impressive timing on all 3 points there. Great. Okay, so we'll go into the question and answer portion of the program. If you have a question you'd like to ask, then please step up to the podium, state your name and address. The candidates will each have 1 minute to reply to your questions. So don't be bashful. There we go. All right.
Hi, my name is Adam Toothaker. I live out on Forest Ave. Dan, you talked about people being taxed enough already. How would you, as a councilman, be able to help pull my taxes back a little bit?
Thank you. I think we're very top-heavy. I think whole departments needed to be halved, at least. We need to honor contracts as far as retirement, but we do not need to be expanding. We have several $90,000 for a salary for a town is outrageous. We also have a problem in the planning department. It's not just the planning, but it's the community development department. I think enough has been done. Enough harm has been done on the community. We have enough laws passed and enough regulations and ordinances. Business is our friend, and every time that you prevent business coming in, I myself, I've attempted to run a quarry, which would have hired how many people?
Okay. Lori, do you want to respond?
I think we are really lucky here in Orono to be the host to the University of Maine, but it definitely impacts our taxes because they don't pay taxes. So I think that one thing that we should do is make a cooperative agreement with the university and request that the university organize their students, because students, I used to be a professor, it's great for students to have real-life projects where they're answering real-life questions. And I know that one of the costs of a town is to get consultants that are specialists to give input on how to manage the town. And we could cut the cost that we spend in outside consultants. So I'm not talking about cutting our, I don't know enough about who our staff is to say that I want to, you know, what Dan is saying. I just know that we can make use of all the expertise we have here and the fact that students need to practice by learn how to do their job, what they want to do. So that's what I would suggest, is work with the university.
Ryan?
Nothing to add to that.
Okay. All right, next question.
How you doing? Paul Melanson. I'm not going to direct this question at anybody, but I see it all the time going on in town here. I'll give you a couple quick examples of it, and you can fire back whichever. But the one thing the issue I have is, say fireworks. The state says, well, we can play with fireworks, and Orono jumps right on the bandwagon and says, we don't want that in our town. I've heard every excuse you can imagine, and there ain't none of them acceptable. If the state votes it in, we should be able to play with it. Town shouldn't vote it out. And it goes back to now, another question I have, and it was just recently toyed with, was this sanctuary city. The United States says they don't belong here. What gives us the right to say we're going to override that? And if you want to use that as a prime example, I cannot hunt on my property even though it's legal. Cannot discharge a firearm on that side of the road. But at the same time, if the state can break, the town can break rules against the federal government, I guess I can start shooting in my backyard because it's just a rule, right? Let's all just break the rules. Let's comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, I think the next person in line would be Lori in this case.
I can tell that you're knowledgeable about that there's so many different governments that impact how we live, right? We have a federal government, we have a state government, we have local government, and each of those has certain rights about setting rules for how we live. I think that the goal in Orono is that we try to do the best that we can for our own community, and work within what we're allowed to do as part of the state of Maine. There was just a meeting earlier this month talking about the marijuana legislation. So the state has now put a moratorium on that. It's legal, but we also as a town have put a moratorium on making rules about that because we want to see what the state's going to do first. So I think the most important thing for you to do is come to town meetings and talk about what your interests are, because as a town, we have the ability to make specific rules for the town. You don't like the one about the fireworks. I wasn't on the town council, so I can't answer that one.
Okay, then we go to Dan.
Thank you. Fireworks, I was involved in trying to get a petition. Town set the circumstances. It was on a holiday. We had to get so many signatures due to the student body. We couldn't get those signatures. I feel cheated. Celebrating the 4th of July, Chinese New Year's, how dare they? And the reasons they used, like Mr. Melanson said, were not appropriate. Sanctuary City, recently we shut it down. We had veterans come here. We were about 80 strong in the meeting. We had to put fear of God in these people for the law, and they still weren't moving. And the thing is this ideology, this confederacy of sanctuary cities, how dare they? And the second thing is hunting on the property, Second Amendment must not be suspended, period. I mean, that's what it must not be suspended. The problem is that things are made on decisions by the council, and it shouldn't be. Thank you.
Well, Paul, I will agree with my two colleagues up here that the town council is a place where these ideas should be brought and debated and discussed. And that not necessarily every community is going to agree with every law that may be set forth at the state or the federal level. And I think that's one of the important things and characteristics about a town council, is that you have the ability to be unique, outside of a greater population. So yeah, I too would encourage the community to come to the council meetings, bring these specific items before, and allow them to be debated on an individual basis.
Okay, next question. Imagine that.
I'm a teacher, so I'm always prepared in case of an awkward silence. Hi, Megan Gardner, Bennick Road. My question has to do with the comprehensive plan. One of the sort of really important jobs of the town council is to work its way steadily through Orono's comprehensive plan. And what I would like to hear you folks talk about is what are some of the specific items in the comprehensive plan that you would prioritize above others? What's important to you from developing Orono's comprehensive plan? Thanks.
I think we go with Ryan on this one.
Well, I'll admit, Megan, that I have not read the entire comprehensive plan. But understanding that, the finances of the community and how we spend our tax dollars and how we apply the tax dollars is an important piece of being able to do that. I know that it was part of the council's objective at the end of 2016 to make sure that, for lack of a better term, look for better ways of spending the dollars that we already have, and looking at the operations. And I think that what I can provide is some direction and input on some of the specific operations of the town and how they tie into the comprehensive plan.
Lori?
The comprehensive plan begins by talking about the population in Orono. It's great that between 2000 and 2010, we had similar population. Most of northern Maine can't claim that, but it turns out that that population increased in elderly and students and decreased in young families. And the comprehensive plan points out that we want Orono to be a town that is a good place for young families. I know in my business, I have people call me often and say, I'd like to buy a house in Orono. Can you tell me if I can make it energy efficient in a cost, not a cost prohibitive way? And I can't. So I think the town planner had done an excellent job of trying to get someone to develop areas in town, and they fell through. They fell through because of the vernal pool issues. And I think that we just have to go back at it again and find the people who will help us make the town the way we want it to be.
Thank you. The comprehensive plan has harmed this community tremendously. If you look at the business park over on Bennick Road, wetlands interrupt that expansion. If you look at other places here, you have no further to look than what has happened with Sunrise, driven out of this community. Earlier, years ago, Lane was here, driven out also. I counted something like 9 rock companies driven out, all from similar excuses. They didn't need that. The problem is with this comprehensive plan, it takes in land that's set aside by land trusts that do not pay taxes. And the problem is that again, the parks, the land, the way it's dealt with is not appropriately done. no taxes paid.
You can pass.
No,
All right.
he already answered.
Another question?
Hi, Ann Ross, and I live on Myrtle Street. And the town, I'm concerned about Park Street and the development along Park Street. As you know, next spring, May, as soon as university ends, they will begin to develop that roundabout with the entrance. We have 2 parcels of land with the potential of creating additional student housing, or if we want to, I guess student housing, because the land adjacent to the Orchard Trails is there for their expansion in and when and if they feel like doing that. There's also a significant piece of land along the river for sale that is being advertised as a good investment for somebody who wants to build apartment units for student. Laura, you're asking for more family housing. I agree with that. At what point do we say we have enough student housing? How can we switch that into something that's more family-driven or makes more sense for that Park Street corridor? Additionally, we've had one moratorium on expansion or building or on Park Street. With another one, that extension was just extended. What does that do for the small person? I happen to own property on that. I can't do anything with that property. I can't make improvements on it. I can't do anything. So how do we find the balance between what the expansion is going to be? How do we meet those smaller individuals that would like to improve their property, and given this roundabout that's going to be built?
I think Lori's first now.
Again, back to the comprehensive plan, there wasn't, in the comprehensive plan, there wasn't any area zone that specifically said it was for or not for student housing. And for a university that has 10 to 12,000 students, depending on how you count it, that's an oversight. And I was at a comprehensive plan meeting of the town council this Monday, and they're working to change that. So all we had was sort of this code word, which some of you know about, that you couldn't have more than 3 people that were not related living in the same unit. And then we've grandfathered in places that had rental property in places that on the plan it says you can't. And so we really have to do a lot of cleaning up to make it clear what we want to do with student housing. And so right now, that's how these housing things came in, because they could get spot zoning since nothing said student housing. And they proposed they would give us taxes. So I think that there's a lot of work to do, and it's unfortunately takes time.
Dan?
Great question. Grandfathered rights are property rights. You have historic constitutional property rights, which a town has gone actively to suspend. They don't have the right to do that. There is a court case, LaPointe versus Town of Orono, where grandfathering was defined. How long you will own the property, whether you have this right or not. Students, now they talk about students, they have a quotas. I'll tell you what, that sounds disgusting to me. And quotas per street, quotas per area. Families, where do young families come in Orono with this high taxes? Sad. If you look at the housing for the elderly, the thing that it's subsidized by these great subsidized housings, yeah, the elderly have increased here in the community. Sad, because they were driven out of their homes. Why? Because of the taxes and the cost. We now have estates being challenged by the town of Orono, who wants to be executor. How sad is that? Thank you.
And I think it's important, whether it's the Park Street discussion or, some other member of this community that's in your shoes with, a piece of property that, you'd like to continue to add value to, or certainly not lose value. I think it's important for the council to be mindful of that. in every situation, and try the best that the council can not to harm the individual property owner.
Okay, next question. You want to ask one? So we're going to ask a question. If you won't, we will.
So looking ahead to planning for the future, many other communities in the state have developed municipally supported fiber optic broadband. And so I am curious as to your support for municipally supported fiber optic broadband.
That's Dan. I think you're first.
Thank you. I don't want to say that the only people got sewage and water were this side of the interstate, but that's true. Broadband is only going to affect a few people, cost like a lot of money. Why can't we get a business in here and let them pay for this thing because they need it? Why must we always do contracts with new businesses and doing TIFs, which hurt us for tax-wise? How, we bend over backwards for certain types of businesses and drive others out. Pretty sad. This prejudice costs legal fees. The behavior is just bizarre. Fiber optics is infrastructure. And it's pretty sad that we do a little bit hodgepodge here, hodgepodge there. We never consolidate the idea. Thank you.
Okay, Ryan.
Suzanne, I apologize. I do not have near enough information to make a meaningful comment, so I'll take a pass. I'm sorry.
Okay. Lori?
Yes, all I know is that Jeff is on, Suzanne, I know that Jeff is on a committee that has to do with fiber optic broadband. And I'm a big supporter of Jeff, but I don't know a lot about that.
All right. Another question? Yes, Cecile.
Cecile Ferguson from North Main Avenue. I would just like to ask you a follow-up question.
Could you speak closer to the microphone so we get...
I'd like to ask a follow-up question about broadband and what you mentioned earlier, Lori, about collaboration with UMaine. Is that something where you would ask the university to participate in this type of infrastructure investment for the community? Thank you.
I think Lori's. Well.
Yes, I know about the 3-ring binder, which was to try to bring better internet service to northern Maine and rural parts of Maine, and I assume that this is something that's related to it. I think that the university has great resources for us to partner with them. And so the idea that Dan was suggesting that we get a company that could put the money out to do that, and perhaps we already have a neighbor that it would benefit them to help us make our town more connected. So I would certainly be willing to try to negotiate that as a volunteer council member for our town.
Yes, with conditions. University of Maine has come into this chamber here and interfered with our form of governance one too many times. They recently came here and they did away with Christopher Columbus Day, and they replaced it with Indigenous Peoples Day. How dare they? That's history. History is one of the greatest things that we have. We have the most wonderful history on earth. No country exists like us. And how dare they surrender that based upon political correctness? August 9th is Indigenous Peoples Day. by worldwide. Why didn't they do that? Now they have 2 days? Shame. The thing about businesses is, what do they really need? Do they need this speed? If they don't need it, I like the cabin in the woods. I like Maine's quaint nature and everything else. Why do we have to be like New York?
Cecile, I think that, whether it's, broadband discussion or, any other topic that may come up, if we can utilize UMaine as a resource, then we'd be foolish not to tap into, that expertise and those resources. So, yes.
Okay, and then we have another question? Go right ahead.
Again, I'm always prepared, this happens in the classroom all the time. Megan Gardner, Bennick Road. On the subject of tax relief, because that is certainly something we're all very, very concerned about. One of the challenges, perhaps, is if you can't rely on sort of outside sources, one of the challenges in seeking tax relief is certainly trying to balance business development and growth of the economy with quality of life and having the town character that we like to have. Where do you place your priorities in terms of finding that balance between maintaining the community we love, but also trying to grow the economy of this community so we can have some tax relief?
Ryan, I think you're...
No, great question, and I think it is a delicate balance, and with the community, I think it's a different balance than it would be, in a business or private sector. But I think that balance can be obtainable. I think that regardless of what the revenues are, the taxes are, I think that we have to look for better, faster, less, more cost-effective ways to continue to provide, the services that make Orono such a great place to live. But if those revenues do fall, then I think the council has to, work with the appropriate managers within the town to develop solutions to do things a little differently.
Well, I know that the town's already working on that, in that the historic district that's along Main Street has 79 buildings, mostly homes, that are along it, and majority of those are historic. And some of them are listed in National Register of Historic Places, and they certainly make the character of Orono what it is. But the town comprehensive planning committee is already working on making that a business district also, and describing ways in which people could infill buildings, but make sure that the buildings have the character of the buildings on either side of them. So if you have historic buildings on either side of you, you may put something in that could be a business, but it has to look like it fits with the community. And so that encourages people to fill in a bit in ways that would be something that would bring tax revenue to the town. And I'm supportive of that. I think that's wise development that won't be negative impact.
Thank you. Tax relief and growing the economy. Okay, if everybody has to be this perfect country club type business, I mean computer or software, whatever, it takes away all incentives. The more diverse the community, back in the 50s, this place was hopping. I mean, we had bowling alley, we had all sorts of things down in this Main Street, diverse businesses. We have none of that now. I saw a sign coming off the interstate. I mean, I enjoy the different facilities that we have, but, it said, welcome to Drunk Thursdays. I mean, sad that the only thing that we have is like breweries going up everywhere. I mean, I'm not targeting that business, but let's talk about something else. Oh, perfect business, historic district. Do you want to talk about tiers on those old homes over there in the historic district? if their window is energy efficient, they have to tear it out? Sad. Thank you.
All right. Next question. Paul?
Paul Lanson again. I'm really not going to make a comment. I'm just going to make a statement to all of you. You're sitting there talking to yourself about readjusting things, and you want to keep a picture that you would like to see. How about those business people that have to pay for what you would like to see? It is a historic district, but I'll tell you, I see change coming up around us every day, and it ain't going to be there forever unless it's really, really historical. Then it's just another old building. We renovate them all the time, and we change them. But we got to come to reality. Businesses, small businesses, they're going to move in, give the money back to where it belongs to the people. Tell them you want to play football, you buy your own uniforms. You want to play basketball, you pay for your own buses to go someplace.
Paul, do you have a question?
I don't really have a question, but this is what you got to think about if you're going to sit on the city council. The taxpayers that own the property are the ones that are paying for this on our shoulders. So, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
I have another question, please.
Paul Smith. Could each of you perhaps take a minute, not more than a minute, please, to describe your past experience in local government, either in elected office or through service on boards and commissions, and not necessarily here in Orono, but anywhere in the world you may have been?
I've lost track.
I'm happy to go first because it'll be very short. This would be my first service in a local office. So 0.
Lori?
I serve for the state of Massachusetts on a board that advised the state legislature on setting parameters for environmental policy. So about the time the National Environmental Policy Act came in, for the decade after that, towns had to figure out how they were going to address environmental policy. And so I actually represented a business on that board. There were homeowners, business people, state people, and it met for 2 years. And so that was my experience. It sounds somewhat like there was a board for 5 years here that was meeting, that was trying to imagine how we do development when we have vernal pools, and how we keep up development, but also manage the habitat. So that's my one experience. Otherwise, I come to the meetings here in Orono.
Okay, Dan?
Thank you. Ever since I was 4 years old, my father has taken me to these chambers. Of course, it was a different town hall then. We've had 3 cents inspected by everybody, burnt to the ground. We had 2 fire stations burnt to the ground, inspected by everybody. You know, the authority that they think that they can make inspections and say that something is perfect is absolutely hogwash. That alone proves it. My whole life here, my whole life, I've gone to many, many town meetings. I've seen the implementation of this Agenda 21 through the comprehensive plan, this nonsense about vernal pools, drain water, and how it's hurt businesses. Now, if there was a balanced plan that embraced the whole of the community instead of singular, the problem is with political correctness, guess what? You know, it's very prejudiced, and it's almost like a religion. You either adhere to it or you don't. And if you don't adhere to it, oh my gosh, you're the enemy. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question. All right, I'll ask one. The state of Maine in referendum recently legalized recreational marijuana in the last state election. And the state legislature has put a moratorium on implementation of that, and they're trying to set rules to regulate marijuana, recreational marijuana. They've also given municipalities the ability to restrict and regulate recreational marijuana. I'm not interested in your views on marijuana, either for or against recreational marijuana, but what I'm interested in is what the council is going to have to wrestle with this and establish what the local regulations are going to be in addition to the state regulations. What would you view as an appropriate process for the council to employ to come to a decision on the issue and what we're going to do about that? I'm interested in the process that you would like to see the council employ. I think Lori's up.
I was at a meeting recently where that was discussed, and I was impressed that the people who work for the town of Orono had done some homework to advise the town council, and there was also someone from the city of Bangor that was invited to give their input on what they had learned for the city of Bangor. They gave examples of how towns in Colorado had been impacted by having legalized marijuana, so that would help advise us. And I think that continuing, maybe having a whole committee that would be learning about what's happened in the other states where marijuana is legal, specifically in the college towns in those states, because Orono is going to be different than any other town in the state, because the colleges that are in the southern part of the state are in much bigger cities. Even Brunswick is a bigger city than here, and Lewiston, Auburn, and so we already have, we know we're different because of the university. So I think we need a committee.
Dan?
Medical marijuana has a lot of benefits, but the question is being asked about recreational. Went after no smoking. Is this a no smoking room? Where do you smoke around here? They did that. And they aggressively went after those corporations. Now, you can call this a grassroots movement. But the idea that anything that happens in this state is small business first. What monies do they bring in? You could tax this into it being a black market or God, who knows how they sell this stuff. My personal concern is I've been over in Europe and I've seen what it has done to Belgium and Antwerp and to the people and this open. Thank you.
Jeff, I think the process should be lengthy, and the process should involve facts and fewer emotion, and should get feedback from all the stakeholders. A big percentage of the population of this community. I mean, that referendum, I mean, it's no secret that referendum was introduced and supported by interest nowhere close to the state of Maine. So now that the referendum's passed, the state legislature they're handling the issue. If and when it comes to the council, I mean, I think the council needs to be very rigorous and have a very thoughtful, lengthy process to ensure that they get the thoughts and views of the entire community.
Okay. Next question.
It's a long walk up here. This is intimidating. Sam Coons, I live at 29 Mainwood Avenue. Town council, serving on council is an honor, but it's also a huge time commitment. I know we're all busy. All of us are very involved with our businesses, either owning it or running it, or and it may be more time than one's really fully aware of between that and committee meetings and that sort of thing. What level of time commitment are you willing to give to this? And I guess I'll just leave it at that. Jeff, feel free to jump in. my fellow troublemaker. Thank you.
I think Dan's up.
I can be called, I guess, a perpetual candidate. Every time this comes around, you see a sign out there that says vote for LaPointe. Where are the people that go to polls? This is pathetic. 400, 350? Shameful. How do we activate the people? I'm not sure. But I think if people really knew what was being at stake, I think that they would come to the polls better. What kind of commitment do you do for the future, for your children, your grandchildren, your families, the seniors in your community that you love? And it all has to do with love and family. And the thing is, when you take the corporate response, which is basically heartless, people get hurt. You have to temper this. We're unique, but they're quickly weeding out all uniqueness out of this community. Thank you.
So I have no doubt that, that it's probably more of a time commitment than, any one of the three of us, can appreciate. But it is before I actually threw my name in the hat for this entire process, it was a discussion that Trey and I had, a lengthy discussion. And so the very specific answer to your question is that I'm willing to put in whatever amount of time it takes to support this community.
Okay. Next question?
No, Lori.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lori.
I've been going
That's why.
to council meetings for the last few months, or maybe on and off for the last 6 months, but as many as are announced, I've been going to for the last few months. And it definitely is a lot of work, and I'm very impressed with the people on the council and all of their dedication, and I'd be happy to be among them. I also am a single parent of 2 wonderful teenagers, and I have my own business, and they're pretty independent these days, and so I want to fill my time that I was using for parenting to help Orono be better.
Okay, did we get everybody? Yeah, we did. Next question?
I can ask another question.
Go right ahead.
I'm going to ask you about symbolism and Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter. Just kidding. That was one I prepared for my students for today. So, Megan Gardner, Bennick Road. I'd like to ask another question, I guess, on the theme of tax relief, because it's certainly a pressing issue in the town. So, a lot of times when, I don't know if you've ever sat through any of the budget committee meetings, but it's a lot. And it's very intricate, and it's very tight and razor thin, and there are a lot of hard decisions made. One of the things that the council always comes up against is this idea of, at what point do we have to potentially reduce services in order to not raise people's taxes an exorbitant amount? And so I guess I would I'm not sure that the council has a good answer for that question, because it's a really tough one. People like the quality of life in Orono. They don't want it to change, but we also can't keep raising our taxes. So when it comes to the question of reduced services, do you feel there's an area that you would find appropriate for reducing services, or would you be seeking some other alternative to that?
I think Ryan's up first.
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, I would say I would look to seek an alternative source or mechanism before reducing that service. In my professional, background for the last, 10 years at least, been managing, small businesses, and each and every one of those businesses is unique. But every single year, we have to provide a higher level of service and slightly reduce those expenses associated with that. So we are constantly, this year's no different. We're in, budget planning season right now for 2018. And so once again, myself and my team are going through the process where we're looking to add service, but, do it more effectively. So that's the approach I think the council should take, is not necessarily get rid of any of the services, but try to figure out a different way to do it.
Lori?
I agree with Ryan. I think that's important, is to try to figure out how we can streamline the costs or reduce the costs on the services we already provide. I have not sat in on those tedious budget meetings. I can tell you that I've come and then thought, oh my gosh, these people are so dedicated, I'm going home now. So I would, if elected, I would sit through the budget meetings, and I would and be able to drill down and give you my suggestions, because I run a small business, and that's, in the years that I've been running a small business, I'm impressed at for all the other people I meet who are doing it, because every small business is unique in its own way, and what it provides and how it might be able to cut costs and still provide the best services. And I'm sure that Orono has its own unique things that we wouldn't want to cut, and other things that we might be able, with a new set of eyes, with someone who has different outside experience, to be able to help trim the budget a little in some places.
Yeah, Dan?
Thank you. I think a good place to start is with the RSU 26. It needs to be dissolved. It does whatever it wants, gives us the bill. Pretty sad. And that's a very high bill, very inefficiently run. There's a lot of issues as to why to take back our educational system. And one of them is financial, that's for sure. How can you do things more creatively to save money? I've already suggested, that maybe some of the departments are top-heavy and we're overpaying some individuals for very simple work that could be done. No further example need to be than a previous town clerk and treasurer, Wanda Thompson. She was fantastic. These people exist. We have to look for them. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question? Well, it's almost about 8 minutes to 8. If we've exhausted your curiosity about the candidates, then I guess we might just close this up. So, no further questions?
Surely you must have one more exciting question, Jeff.
Oh, okay, there is
Okay,
one.
there we go.
I'm Willis Beasley. I live on Forest Ave. I grew up near Brunswick, which when I was young felt to me anyway like a community pretty much based on Bowdoin College. And I've seen, I think as Portland has expanded, Brunswick has kind of obtained its own identity, and it really, Bowdoin's still a big part of it, but it's not a town based on Bowdoin College. I feel like Orono is very much based on the University of Maine. But as we see Bangor kind of improving and expanding, I wonder if there's going to be a point where Orono needs to kind of look at its own identity separate of the university. I don't honestly know if that'll ever happen. We're certainly a lot further north. And so, maybe the comparison to Brunswick is not an apt one, but I just wonder if you ever see a time when Orono might kind of break away from the university and just kind of have its own identity, and what that would be based on, whether it's industry or tourism or anything else. It's kind of a broad question, but.
And I think Lori's up first on this one.
Well, I would like to see Orono develop a focus on ecotourism. I think that we have a world-class, the university has a world-class environmental science program, and those students finish their programs and leave because there aren't jobs here. And I moved to Maine, and so many people tell me that they're Maine guides. That means they've been trained and they're certified, but they're actually not serving as guides. And we have the river, and there's discussion of having a canoe trail that goes up the river where people would be camping along the river, and one of those sites would be in Orono. And we have the Orono Paddlers Association that's been doing weekly events all summer long and bringing people to Orono for paddling. I think that we could model how you would take a town and have all of its brilliance and beauty be something that would bring people into the town.
Dan?
Pretty hard to say, put the chicken before the Ag, whatever, the University of Maine, how many years back it goes and how it's involved itself here. Our fire departments and what we help over there, the size of the buildings, the vote of the students, it alters our local polls. I think the idea of having events and everything else here is a good idea. We don't really truly outside the university have an event center. Collins Theater for the Arts is nice, but where is it? Where's the big memorial gym? It's all on campus. This is a quasi-governmental organization, and Orono has those benefits of that. But do we need our own? If we had this, then they would shut it down. Thank you.
My turn?
Yeah. You're left.
Yeah. Thank you. Willis, I'm relatively new to the area, but it's difficult for me to imagine, Orono with a separate identity from UMaine, and that's a relatively newcomer's perspective. And the reason I have for saying that, I still have the opportunity to travel around the country quite a bit, and you'll see people in airports and different places, and you tell them where you're from, and there's a lot of people out there that you meet in industry that have gone to school at University of Maine, and they'll tell you, oh, I went to UMaine, and is Pat's Pizza still there? That's the first question everybody asks, is Pat's Pizza still there? So it's difficult for me to imagine that separation in the near term.
Okay. Do we have another question? Got a few minutes left. No? Then I want to thank the candidates for coming. I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming out tonight. And don't forget to follow this up with voting on November 7th. We're going to be voting up at the university. Yeah, that's right, at the Memorial Gym. And there's parking's all been arranged and everything, so it's going to be pretty easy to get in and out. So polls open at 7 o'clock, I think.
Everyone in the whole town votes there now.
Everybody votes there.
The Orono website doesn't say that.
Well, we can make it say that. Okay, then, thank you, everyone. Thank you, candidates.